So animal research, this is not my area of expertise. I'm not going to say much about this because I'll just end up putting my foot in my mouth and talking about something I don't fully understand. I am pretty committed to working with humans and doing patient-centered research that is immediately going to translate into useful information for people in clinic. So I get the argument that animal research has to happen, but so far it hasn't been tremendously successful. That which works well in a rodent population doesn't necessarily translate to humans. The other thing that I think that most people don't understand is we don't actually have a good animal model of research. We can expose an animal to a toxicant that damages their dopamine-producing cells, and we can create some of the same symptoms that you see in Parkinson's disease, but we don't actually have an animal model that starts and progresses the same way that Parkinson's does. We can damage neurons and get some similar symptoms, but the disease in the rodent does not have that same progressive neurodegenerative cascade that we have. That which we use in animal models doesn't progress. So we can mimic progression. We can go in and expose to mimic a state of progression, and that's kind of what we do. But that is not the same as having a runaway train that we are trying to stop. The other thing that drives me nuts about animal research is there's so much we don't use. I mean, we have used other creatures to get us data so that we have some clues and a better understanding of Parkinson's disease. Take DHEA. There are a few studies that have been done that show if you administer DHEA to a rodent model of Parkinson's disease, the neurons live longer, they make more dopamine, the rodent is asymptomatic longer and lives longer. Right? And there have been several of these studies that have been done. There has never been a study where we administer DHEA to patients with Parkinson's disease. I don't know why not. I don't know why those researchers dropped the ball. I don't know why clinical researchers never picked it up. I don't know if there's not enough money to be made in DHEA supplementation, that it just hasn't been prioritized by industry. But we have, ochratoxin. There are, I think 3 or 4 studies now that show that there's a mold toxin called ochratoxin A that is high in, if you expose rats to ochratoxin A, it will kill off their dopamine neurons and create this clinical syndrome that looks a lot like Parkinson's disease. I think one study even showed that rodents with ochratoxin-induced symptoms of dopamine deficiency responded well to L-DOPA. So you would think the next logical step would be to go running to patients with Parkinson's and ask, do they have higher levels of ochratoxin? That's the reason we just sacrificed these rats, was to find out if ochratoxin could be responsible for hurting dopaminergic neurons. And the scientists concluded yes. There was a huge link between ochratoxin exposure and loss of dopamine neurons. Why has nobody in the Parkinson's community run with the idea of testing people with Parkinson's for ochratoxin? We're all exposed to ochratoxin every single day. We have a smoking gun. Somebody in the rodent field just learned that ochratoxin kills dopamine neurons. Why are we running with that in human trials? I talked in the last video about the primate study that was done where they first gave primates Parkinson's disease, and then they gave primates so much levodopa that they developed levodopa-induced dyskinesia. And then they wanted to find out if you give these primates placebo or high-dose DHA fish oil, can we diminish their levodopa-induced dyskinesia? Can we reduce their dyskinesia? The answer was yes. Within a month, they got a 50% reduction in levodopa-induced dyskinesia in this primate population. It's been probably 10 years now since that study was done, and we've never carried it over, translated it to humans. We have never taken patients with Parkinson's disease, humans, and given them placebo or high DHA oil. So it's not that my frustration, I don't have a problem with animal research, but what I'm trying to do is find the fastest way to a cure. And so my frustration is that before we go out chasing more funding to do more research that will explain a biochemical mechanism of action, before we sacrifice more animals to understand what's happening here, let's first stop and better use the research we already have.